I want you to picture something for a second. Just imagine a sweeping, monumental concrete opera house, right? And it's rising right out of the Nebraska prairie.
Mm-hmm.
Like the native grasses are literally creeping up its sloping, curved shells. And as you get closer to this thing, you actually hear it.
You hear the building.
Right. The building itself is playing a symphony. It's using live wind, massive brass pipes, and these tensioned acoustic strings that are, get this, driven by public radio waves.
It's just an incredible image.
It really is. And like as this music plays, actual drinkable water is raining down into a bronze courtyard, and it's being pulled straight out of the invisible Midwestern air.
Which just sounds like pure magic.
Total magic. But here is the catch for you listening right now. Imagine this building isn't a concert hall. And it isn't a water treatment plant either. You're actually looking at a multi-billion-dollar hyperscale data center.
Yeah, it's a staggering image, isn't it? I mean, we have become so accustomed to the internet physically looking like, a windowless, humming cardboard box dropped behind a chain link fence.
Right. Just an ugly warehouse.
Exactly. So the idea that the cloud could take the form of a beautiful civic machine, it completely upends how we think about our digital infrastructure.
It totally upends it. And, well, that is the exact contradiction we are unpacking in today's deep dive. We have a single, incredibly dense, and frankly, mind-bending source on the table today.
We really do.
It is an architectural thesis published this very month, July 2026, by Zachary David Enfield. It's titled The Nebraska Public Radio Music Data Center Design Thesis.
Quite a mouthful.
Right. And our mission today is to figure out how this document merges massive digital computing, highly disciplined thermodynamics, acoustic engineering, and atmospheric hydrology into one physical structure.
The central question being, is this purely poetic pie-in-the-sky science fiction?
Yeah.
Or is this a mathematically viable, rigorous blueprint for what happens when we refuse to let the digital world degrade the physical one?
Exactly. And to help me, and to help you listening right now, decipher these incredibly dense engineering blueprints, I've got the perfect person sitting across from me.
Glad to be here.
Because there is a lot of thermodynamics in this document.
Yeah.
I mean, we are going to need to translate some serious physics today.
We definitely are. There's a lot of math in this thesis.
But, before we even look at how a building like this breathes and plays music, we have to talk about the why now. Why propose this incredibly complex water-generating musical data center in July 2026? And why put it in Nebraska, of all places?
Well, the timing and the location are basically the entire catalyst for the project.
Right.
If you want to understand the architecture, you really have to look at the political and economic reality on the ground in Nebraska right this minute.
Okay, let's unpack this. What's happening in Nebraska?
So Governor Jim Pillen has just signed an executive order that effectively ends access to the Imagine Nebraska Act incentives for new data centers.
Wow. Okay, so a total freeze on incentives.
Basically, yeah. He has directed state agencies to evaluate the sheer toll these facilities take on the electrical grid, on local water tables, on agricultural land, and of course on public revenue.
Right. And I want to pause here for a quick second because, if you've listened to Deep Dive before, you know how we handle this. We are maintaining strict political impartiality here.
Absolutely.
We are not taking a side on the governor's policy, and we are not endorsing any anti-data center viewpoints. Our goal here is simply to report the factual, immediate context that this thesis was born out of.
Right. The political freeze is literally the landscape the author is designing for. We have to understand that to understand the building.
Exactly. We're just looking at the facts. So the state is hitting the pause button.
They are. And the reason for that pause is the almost unfathomable scale of the proposed projects. I mean, the thesis cites reporting on a Google-associated project in the state that is being discussed in the range of 1 to 3 gigawatts.
Okay, wait. Let's actually linger on that word for a second, a gigawatt.
Yeah, it's massive.
Because I think that is an abstract number to most people,
Yeah.
right? But in the realm of electricity, that is terrifyingly huge.
It really is. To put it in perspective, a single gigawatt is roughly equivalent to the capacity of a large commercial nuclear reactor.
A nuclear reactor, just for one data center.
Yes. We are talking about a single private facility requiring more power than the entire city of Lincoln, Nebraska uses.
That is insane.
And there is already active or emerging data center activity in central Nebraska, specifically in places like Grand Island and Kearney. So The state is staring down the barrel of a massive infrastructure shift.
It feels like a digital gold rush, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
But instead of panning for gold in a river, tech companies are building these invisible resource vacuums.
That's a great way to put it.
Right.
Yeah.
They quietly suck up the public power grid and the local water supply.
Mm.
And Enfield's thesis is essentially asking a real provocative question here. He's asking, if you are going to build a vacuum that massive in our backyard, what if it had to be a public monument?
And that right there is the core civic premise of the entire document. Enfield argues that a state like Nebraska shouldn't be forced to accept infrastructure of planetary importance packaged in a cheap, oversized storage shed.
No more windowless boxes.
Exactly. A building that consumes this much land and electricity and has this much of an effect on a community owes that community an architectural response proportional to its consequence.
It needs to give something back.
Right. It needs to give something back visually, acoustically, and physically.
And he didn't just pick, a random cornfield for this monument. He specifically targets what he calls the Tri-City region for the project, that corridor connecting Grand Island, Kearney, and Hastings. So why there? Why that specific spot?
Because that specific corridor is incredibly strategic. It isn't just empty space out there. The Tri-City region sits right at the geographic center of the United States.
Oh, out right in the middle.
Yeah. It straddles Interstate 80. It has major historic rail lines. It sits on redundant fiber optic corridors that often run parallel to those railways.
Which is huge for data, obviously.
Crucial for data. And it taps into the state's unique public power infrastructure. But crucially, it also sits right on the Platte Basin water infrastructure. Add in the nearby universities and colleges, and you have a genuine crossroads. It's basically the physical and digital heart of the country.
So the table is really set here. We have a state pushing back on runaway resource consumption and a geographic location perfectly primed to host a new model of infrastructure.
Exactly.
So if we are completely rejecting the windowless cardboard box model of the modern data center, what exactly is Enfield proposing we build instead? Because the visual profile in this thesis is, honestly, it's breathtaking.
It really is. The author provides a proof of concept visual profile, and he is very explicit that this isn't just disposable, trendy concept art.
Right. It's not just pretty pictures for the sake of it.
No, the aesthetic form is deeply tied to the function. You have these sweeping, massive concrete shells that dominate the profile.
That was so organic.
Yeah, and there is a deep right-hand entrance arch that looks incredibly inviting, which is the exact opposite of a security fence. The foregrounds are planted, so the native prairie grass literally rises up and bleeds onto the lower slopes of the building itself.
Like the building is growing right out of the dirt.
Right. And rising out of the center and the back, you have these clustered vertical pipe towers.
Like I said at the beginning, it looks like a futuristic opera house. Yeah. But what I found fascinating is how he organizes the inside. Because that exterior curve creates a massive problem for what actually goes inside a data center, doesn't it?
It creates a huge geometric conflict.
Right, and the thesis proposes this concept called the nested realms to solve it.
Yes. So, the building is designed in 3 distinct layers. Let's start at the absolute center, layer 1, the data vault.
The core.
The core. This is where the servers live. It is perfectly orthogonal, meaning everything is based on right angles and straight lines. It is highly secure, highly fire resistive, and entirely focused on geometric efficiency.
Which makes perfect sense. I mean, if you think about it, server racks are rectangles.
Exactly.
The cable trays that run above them are straight lines. The cooling aisles are straight lines.
Yeah.
You want all of that inside a strictly rectangular room to maximize every single inch of the floor plan.
You have to. Then you jump all the way out to layer 3. The outermost layer. This is the civic shell.
Okay.
This is that monumental, sweeping, curved, public-facing exterior we just described. The part that looks like an opera house interacting with the sun, the wind, and the public.
Okay, here's where I have to play devil's advocate and push back on the architecture for a second.
Porfer.
If you take a perfectly square box of servers and you drop it inside a sweeping, organic, curved shell, you are creating an absolute nightmare of wasted space.
It's the classic square peg in a round hole.
Exactly. Think about a square peg in a round hole.
Yeah.
What happens to all those awkward, hollow corners where the rigid square meets the swooping curve? I mean, in commercial real estate, wasted square footage is a death sin.
And that exact tension is what layer 2 solves. It is called the environmental interstice.
The interstice.
Right. Instead of thinking of this building like a Russian nesting doll, which is a bit of a cliche, think of it more like a human cell.
Okay, a cell.
The data vault is the nucleus, highly protected and rigid. The civic shell is the outer membrane. That awkward space in between the interstices is the cytoplasm, and it is doing a massive amount of biological work.
The environmental interstice. I love the biological analogy because this lower is essentially the organs of the building, right?
Precisely. The quote-unquote wasted space isn't wasted at all. This thick middle layer houses the mechanical galleries, the acoustic splitters, the massive thermal storage tanks, the water harvesting modules, and even the public observation routes.
Oh, wow. So it's packed.
It is entirely functional. The curved exterior shell isn't just a thin, decorative facade pasted onto a warehouse. It has an occupied working thickness.
I see. So instead of hiding all the ugly machinery on the roof or in a fenced-off side yard, the building just swallows it all into the walls.
The thesis rightly points out that conventional data centers often delegate all their messy machinery to scattered rooftop units, perimeter louvers, and ugly sound barriers built as an afterthought.
Right, which looks terrible.
Terrible. This project pulls all of that exterior mess into the interstitial layer. The two opposing geometries, the strict square of the digital data and the sweeping curve of the public monument, are allowed to coexist because the space between them is doing all the heavy lifting for the environment.
But, all of this architectural brilliance brings up a massive physical problem. The biggest environmental job a data center has is managing heat.
Oh, absolutely. Heat is the enemy.
Right. If you take a gigawatt of computing power, which is essentially a giant array of electric heaters, and you wrap it in a thick acoustic concrete shell, haven't you just built a giant pizza oven? Like, how do you keep it from melting down?
This is where we really have to dive into the thermodynamics, and it requires incredible discipline. The foundational rule of this entire thesis, and the author emphasizes this repeatedly to ensure this isn't just a fluffy art project, is the strict separation of mission-critical operations from public expression.
Meaning the art can't break the internet.
Exactly. The servers must stay cool and safe, even if every single piece of public art, every musical pipe, every water feature completely breaks down. The art can never, ever supersede the infrastructure.
Good rule. So how does this giant concrete-wrapped oven actually cool itself?
It relies on a hybrid cooling approach, starting with liquid cooling at the core. They use direct-to-chip cooling or rear-door heat exchangers to remove the incredibly high-density heat right at the processor level.
Okay, let's visualize that for the listener, because rear-door heat exchanger sounds like intense engineering jargon.
Fair enough.
So imagine a typical server cabinet, right? Like a refrigerator full of computers. Instead of just blowing cold air into the room and hoping for the best, you put a radiator full of chilled liquid directly onto the back door of the cabinet. So as the hot air leaves the servers, it immediately hits an ice-cold wall of liquid before it even has a chance to enter the room.
That's exactly it. And the reason you do this is the specific heat capacity of water. Liquid is profoundly more efficient at absorbing and moving heat than air is.
Right, water holds heat way better.
Way better. By capturing the heat in liquid right at the source, you remove the vast bulk of the thermal load immediately. You stop the room from becoming an oven in the first place.
Okay, so the heaviest lifting is done by the liquid loops. But the thesis still talks a lot about air cooling. Why do we still need air if the liquid is so incredibly efficient?
Because liquid cooling handles the high-density processors, but you still have ambient heat. You have memory components, storage drives, networking gear, power supplies, and of course, human technicians working inside the vault who actually need to breathe.
Oh, right, humans. Can't forget the humans.
Right. So air cooling remains as a carefully managed safety layer. But because the liquid handled the peak heat, the air system doesn't have to function like a perpetual indoor Category 5 hurricane, which is honestly what most data centers feel like.
Which leads to one of my favorite concepts in the entire paper. The thesis proposes a strategy called phase-distributed breathing. I just love how that sounds.
It is very poetic.
It is. Instead of a single giant fan system blowing a constant gale force wind, it's like the building is a living organism, panting in different zones, exactly where and when it needs to.
The panting organism is a really great way to think about it. And the author uses the mathematics of thermodynamics to prove that a data center doesn't need to lock every fan into a perfectly constant, synchronized speed. He brings in equation 1, which governs sensible heat.
Okay, let's unpack the math here. I want to make sure we really get the physics of this. The equation is Q dot equals M dot times CP times delta T. What does that actually mean for the air inside the server room?
It's a fundamental principle of thermodynamics. Q dot is the rate at which you can remove heat from a space.
Okay, so Q dot is the cooling power.
Exactly. To figure out how much heat you can pull out, you multiply three things together. First, m dot, which is the mass flow rate of the air. Literally how many pounds of air are moving through the space per second.
Pounds of air. Weird to think of air having weight, but okay.
It adds up. Second, Cp, which is the specific heat capacity of air at a constant pressure, meaning how much thermal energy the air can actually hold before it gets hot itself.
Got it.
And third, delta T, which is the difference in temperature between the hot server and the cool air you are pushing in.
Okay, so if the air's ability to hold heat, the Cp is a fixed property of physics, and the temperature difference, the delta T is relatively fixed by how cold you can afford to make your chillers. The only thing you can really control to get more heat out is m dot, moving more mass of air.
Correct. But the author's point with this equation is that just pulsing air rapidly everywhere doesn't magically create more cooling capacity overall. It only helps if it's doing something specific, breaking up stagnant pockets of hot air.
Like if you have a pocket of hot air trapped behind a cluster of messy cables, a constant steady breeze might just flow right around it, like water flowing around a rock in a stream.
Yes, exactly.
The hot air just sits there, baking the equipment.
But a sudden gust pulse could knock that hot boundary layer loose.
In fluid dynamics, that's called disrupting the thermal boundary layer. But, and this is the critical warning in the thesis, you cannot make the whole building pulse at the exact same time.
Why not?
If you do, you run headfirst into a brutal law of physics. He introduces equation 2, the fan affinity relationship. Fan power is proportional to the cube of rotational speed.
Wait, let's slow down on that. The cube. Usually we think of things as linear, right? Like if I drive my car twice as fast, I expect to use roughly twice as much gas. But you're saying fans don't work that way? Not at all. The relationship is cubed. So if you have a fan running at a certain speed and you decide you want to double the airflow, you have to double the fan speed.
Okay, makes sense. So if
But the energy required isn't 2 times the original energy, it's 2 cubed. 2 times 2 times 2.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it takes 8 times as much electrical power to spin that fan twice as fast.
8 times. So if you rev all the fans in the entire building up to maximum speed at the exact same moment to create a giant synchronized pulse of air, you aren't just doubling your power bill, you are burning an astronomical exponential amount of electricity.
Yes, you'd be creating massive pressure waves, stressing the physical equipment, and wasting a staggering amount of energy.
That's terrifying for a power grid.
It is. So the solution is phase-distributed breathing. You divide the fan walls into spatial fields. Field A might spin up a little bit to clear a localized hotspot, while field B on the other side of the room settles down to its baseline speed. The total aggregate cooling capacity of the whole building remains basically constant, so you avoid that massive cubed energy penalty. But locally, the air is moving in shifting dynamic patterns.
Like gusts of wind moving through the tall grass on the prairie outside. The building is constantly adjusting its breath. It is incredibly elegant engineering.
It's brilliant.
But, it brings us right back to a deeply human problem. All that moving air, even if it's localized and shifting, it makes noise.
A lot of noise.
The fans make noise, the chillers hum, the compressors vibrate. If you have a facility drawing hundreds of megawatts, spinning thousands of industrial fans, it is going to sound like a Boeing 747 idling on a tarmac.
Easily.
So how on earth does a building this massive avoid deafening the neighbors in Kearney or Grand Island?
This is where we move into the acoustics, and honestly, this might be the most fascinating paradigm shift in the entire document. The thesis introduces the concept of the inverse concert hall.
The inverse concert hall. It's such a brilliant way to frame it. How does that compare to, say, a normal concert hall like the Sydney Opera House?
Well, a traditional concert hall, like the Sydney Opera House or Carnegie Hall, is meticulously designed to take desirable sound, a violin, a singer, and shape it, preserve it, and project it perfectly to an audience without losing its warmth.
Right. You want the sound to reach every corner of the room.
Exactly. But this data center must do the exact opposite. It must take mechanical noise, absorb it, redirect it, and mathematically kill it before it ever crosses the property line.
Wow.
The thesis actually states, silence is treated as an architectural product.
Silence as a manufactured product. That is profound. I mean, we usually just think of silence as the absence of noise, right? Like you turn off the TV and you get silence. But here they have to actively build machinery in spaces dedicated to destroying sound waves.
That's right.
How do they actually do it?
They do it using those thick interstitial shells we talked about earlier, that cytoplasm layer.
The middle layer?
Yes. They create what the author calls acoustic labyrinths. Every single large air intake and exhaust opening is designed to force the moving air through massive, broad chambers at a very low velocity.
So slowing the air down.
Slowing it down, and as the air moves, it has to flow over heavily absorptive surfaces, and crucially, it is forced to make multiple physical turns before it can reach the outside world.
So the sound waves basically get exhausted trying to navigate a maze to find the exit.
Exactly. Sound waves travel incredibly well in straight lines. If you force a sound wave to bend around a 90-degree corner that is covered in specialized sound-absorbing material, it loses a significant amount of its kinetic energy.
It just crashes into the wall and gets absorbed.
Pretty much. And the author grounds all of this in acoustic physics. He introduces equation 4, which is the blade pass frequency equation.
Okay, let's treat the listener with some respect here and walk through the actual calculation. What is blade pass frequency, and why does an architect need to know it?
Sure. So the equation is FBPF equals B times RPM divided by 60. Let's say you have a massive industrial cooling fan with 8 blades. That's your B. And let's say it spins at 1,200 revolutions per minute, your RPM. If you multiply 8 by 1,200, you get 9,600. Divide that by 60 seconds, and you get 160 hertz.
160 hertz. For anyone listening with a musical background, 160 hertz is roughly a low E on a piano keyboard.
Right. It's a very specific, prominent, low hum. Every time a fan blade passes a fixed point in the housing, it pulses the air. That pulse creates a dominant musical note. The architectural model has to calculate exactly what note those massive fans will hum at.
But why? Like, why does the concrete shell care what note the fan is playing?
Because of resonance.
Yeah.
Every physical cavity has a natural resonant frequency.
Oh, like blowing into a bottle.
Exactly. If you've ever blown across the top of a glass bottle and heard a note, that's the resonant frequency of the bottle.
Right.
If the physical dimensions of the concrete exhaust chambers in this building happen to naturally resonate at 160 hertz, that low E, the building will accidentally act like a giant tuned amplifier. It will become a massive concrete megaphone broadcasting that exact hum across the Nebraska prairie. The engineers have to design the physical dimensions of the labyrinths to explicitly avoid resonating at the fan's blade pass frequency.
That is wild. They are mathematically tuning the architecture to explicitly not play the sound of the fans. They are designing an acoustic black hole for the note of E.
And it gets even more difficult when dealing with the heavy compressors and chillers, which produce very low-frequency sounds. He brings in equation 5. Acoustic wavelength equals the speed of sound divided by frequency.
I think we've all experienced this, right? If you are sitting in your living room and a car drives by bumping heavy bass, you don't hear the singer's voice. You don't hear the hi-hat cymbals.
No, those get blocked.
Those high frequencies get blocked by your walls. But you feel that deep, low frequency boom, boom, pushing right through the siding of your house.
Precisely. Low-frequency hums, the deep bass rumbling of heavy machinery, have very long wavelengths. A 50 hertz hum has a wavelength of about 22 feet.
22 feet.
You cannot block a 22-foot wavelength with a thin metal wall or a sheet of drywall or a foam panel. The sound wave just ignores it and pushes right through.
Which perfectly explains the massive concrete shells.
Yes. To stop those long, low-frequency waves, you need immense physical mass and depth. That is why the exterior of this building is made of sweeping, thick concrete. The building's primary shape is the silencer.
So the soundproofing isn't an afterthought box placed around a noisy generator.
No, the architecture itself is doing the dampening. It is a true civic machine.
Okay, so the building swallows its own machine noise completely. It engineers total, absolute silence at the property line. But wait.
Yeah.
We established at the beginning that this thesis is titled The Nebraska Public Radio Music Data Center.
We did.
If the entire architectural goal so far has been to create an acoustic black hole, where does the music come from?
What is so fascinating about this thesis is that the silence is merely the blank canvas.
Oh, I like that.
The author argues that only after the ugly mechanical noise of the servers is killed is the building allowed to have a voice. And that voice is deliberate, curated, and beautiful.
So we've mapped out how this massive concrete lung moves air to cool the servers and how it traps the noise. Let's explore how it actually sings. Because section 5 of this thesis, the building as a physical instrument, completely blew my mind.
It's the most poetic part of the document.
It really is. The building receives live public radio signals like 88.1 FM, AM radio, or old weather archives, and it translates them into physical architectural movement.
Yes. And, we must be incredibly clear on this point because if you describe this to someone, it is very easy to misunderstand. This is not just a building playing an NPR broadcast through some hidden Bose loudspeakers in the bushes.
Right. It's not just a giant concrete Bluetooth speaker streaming a podcast to the town.
No. The building uses air pressure, mechanical valves, and physical materials to mechanically re-perform the data.
Re-perform the data.
Right. The internal signal analysis system breaks down the incoming radio broadcast. It looks at the pitch contours, the rhythmic events, the pauses in speech activity, and it assigns those data features to 5 distinct physical instruments built directly into the architecture.
It's as if the building is a giant concrete synthesizer. But instead of digital circuits making the sound, it's using physical wind and architectural pipes.
Exactly.
You are literally listening to the building play the radio. Let's walk through these 5 instruments because the vision here is so poetic. The first one is the radio pipe hall.
This is the principal civic volume under the central shell. Some of those tall vertical fins we saw in the visual profile actually contain active sounding pipes.
Oh, so the fins aren't just for show.
No, they are the instrument. They receive clean, regulated air, totally separate from the hot, messy server exhaust, and they play notes based on the radio feed. It's like a monumental church organ, but instead of a person pressing keys, the broadcast data is opening and closing the valves.
That's incredible. Then you have the second instrument, the prairie chime garden.
This is located on the landscaped approach as you walk up to the building. It utilizes tuned tubes, bells, and ceramic resonators.
Very zen.
Very. What's brilliant is that some are played naturally by the ambient Nebraska wind, but others are activated by mechanical strikers that are controlled by the radio feed's rhythm. And crucially, it has automated damping mechanisms, so it can be completely silenced at night or during extreme weather.
Which is a very smart concession to reality. Because, no one wants a haunted heavy metal wind chime keeping them awake at 3 a.m. during a tornado warning.
Definitely not.
Instrument number 3, the aeolian galleries.
These are tension strings, similar to a harp, hidden inside the cavities of the shell. Visitors don't see them directly, they hear them indirectly.
Like a hidden hum.
Exactly. The controlled exhaust airflow makes the strings vibrate, so you get this diffuse harmonic shimmer in the background. It creates the illusion that the massive concrete architecture itself is gently humming a chord.
That sounds incredibly beautiful and eerie. Number 4 is the low-frequency resonance chord.
This uses large concrete cavities to provide a deep, slow, harmonic foundation-based notes, basically. But the openings face inward into a protected courtyard.
So it doesn't blast the neighbors.
Exactly. This ensures that the bass frequencies don't travel across the property line and bother the neighbors, which, as we discussed with the acoustic wavelength, is very hard to control.
And finally, the 5th instrument. This is the one that really hit me on an emotional level. The memory hall.
The memory hall treats AM radio not as high-fidelity music, but as a memory medium.
I love that phrase.
It takes oral histories, old weather archive, historical agricultural reports, and interprets the cadence of human speech into abstract breath, low tones, and the movement of water.
Think about that for a second. It translates a farmer's recorded crop report from 1985 into a slow, resonant sigh coming from the building's walls. The artistic vision is staggering.
It really connects the digital to the history of the land.
And the author even mentions that you could feed original compositions into this system, right? Like using generative AI, such as Suno or other music models, to write music specifically for the building's physical register.
Yes. A composer, human or AI, could write a piece of music knowing exactly how much air pressure the building's fans can produce, exactly what notes the pipes can hit, and the building becomes an actual orchestra performing a premier piece of music. The architecture is the instrument.
But air isn't the only thing moving through this building, and air moving across the Midwestern prairie isn't just empty space.
No, it's not.
It carries something else. Humidity. Which leads us to what I consider the most sci-fi, unbelievable element of this entire thesis: harvesting water from thin air.
This is where the thesis moves from acoustic engineering into atmospheric hydrology, the outer acoustic lungs of the building, those same thick chambers dampening the sound double as a water organ.
Okay, stop right there. I have to put my skeptic hat on for a second. Harvesting water from the air, is this real science, or is this just rain-making sci-fi thrown into the thesis to make a tech company look like they're saving the planet?
It sounds like magic, I know, but it is based on very real, very recent science. The thesis explicitly cites a 2025 research paper from MIT published in the journal Nature Communications.
Okay, MIT, that's solid.
To understand the breakthrough, you have to understand the old way of doing this. The traditional way to pull water from the air uses desiccant materials, like those little silica gel packets you find in a new pair of shoes.
Right. Do not eat.
Exactly. They are great at absorbing moisture from the air. But to get the water back out of that material so you can actually drink it, you normally have to heat the desiccant up to incredibly high temperatures to boil the water off and then recondense the steam. It takes a massive amount of thermal energy.
Right. Boiling water takes a ton of power. Anyone who has ever watched a pot on a stove knows it takes a lot of energy to make water change phases. So how do they get the water out of the sponge without using heat?
This is the MIT breakthrough. They use high-frequency ultrasonic mechanical actuators.
Okay, explain how that works at a molecular level, because that sounds crazy.
Essentially, instead of using heat to boil the water out of the pores of the desiccant, they use sound waves to physically shake it out.
Shake it out.
Yeah. When water vapor gets trapped in the sorbent material, it is held there by weak molecular forces, van der Waals forces. The researchers found that if you vibrate the saturated material with high-frequency ultrasound, you induce microscopic cavitation.
Okay.
The physical shaking literally breaks those weak molecular bonds. The water molecules detach, aggregate, and simply drop out of the material as liquid droplets. No boiling, no phase change required.
Wait, they are literally shaking the water out of the microscopic pores using sound waves?
Yes, and because you aren't paying the massive energy penalty to boil and condense the water, the ultrasonic extraction process is roughly 45 times more energy efficient than traditional heat-based extraction.
45 times more efficient. That isn't just an incremental improvement. That is a total paradigm shift in how we might handle water scarcity globally.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
So Enfield proposes lining the acoustic labyrinths of the data center with banks of these advanced sorbent materials.
Using all that incoming air.
Exactly. As the massive volume of cooling air rushes in, the material captures the ambient humidity. Then, automated dampers isolate that section, the ultrasonic actuators kick on silently, and liquid water simply rains down out of the material.
And because this building insists on turning everything into a civic artistic event, this released water doesn't just go down a hidden PVC pipe in a utility closet. It drops into what he calls the water organ court.
The released water visually and audibly strikes stone, bronze, glass, and tensioned membranes before being collected in a central basin.
It's an indoor waterfall.
Right, and the radio feeds data might even choreograph when specific dampers open and when the water drops fall, so the water literally plays a percussive rhythm before it is harvested for use.
It paints an incredible picture.
Uh-huh.
But, let's ground this in reality and talk about the actual volume of water. Because, as you mentioned earlier, we have to avoid corporate greenwashing.
We really do.
Are they claiming this building is going to end agricultural droughts in Nebraska? Like, is it going to supply the whole city?
No, and the author is fiercely protective against those kinds of exaggerated claims. He brings in equation 6 to ground the hydrology in strict physical reality. The atmospheric water mass estimate.
More math. I love it.
He shows the mathematical proof that the water yield depends entirely on three things: the total volume of air moving through the building, the actual reduction in the humidity ratio of that air, and the effectiveness of the capture material. It is a strict physical limit based on the weather that day.
Like the old saying, you can't squeeze blood from a stone. And you can't squeeze a flood of water out of dry, freezing winter air in January.
Precisely. The system will harvest vastly more water on a humid July morning than on a bitter February night, which is why there is a rigorous, legally binding hierarchy for how this harvested water is actually used.
It's not just a free-for-all.
No, it is not just dumped into the Platte River so the tech company can take a drone photo for their annual ESG sustainability report.
Right. So if it's not a PR stunt, where does the water actually go? What's the hierarchy?
It is separated into strict grades of usage. First in line is technical water. This goes right back into the cooling loops of the servers to replace any water that evaporated in the chillers.
Okay, so the building prioritizes its own survival.
Always. Second is landscape and ecological water. This is used to sustain the native prairie plants growing on the property or sent to constructed wetlands nearby.
Makes sense.
Third is high-grade treated water. Only if the water is aggressively filtered, tested, and proven completely safe to municipal standards would it ever be routed to public drinking taps in the civic areas.
And fourth,
Finally, an emergency reserve.
Okay, I have to push back on this hierarchy for a minute.
Sure.
If the vast majority of the time they're just using this magical water catcher to cool their own servers, the technical water, how is that a win for the community? If a tech giant builds a fancy water collector just to drink the water itself, the community essentially gets nothing out of the deal.
This is a crucial point, and it requires us to connect this technology to the bigger picture of resource management. The concept you have to understand here is demand substitution.
Demand substitution, explain that.
Every single liter of water this building pulls from the Midwestern sky and uses for its cooling towers is a liter of water it did not suck out of the local municipal aquifer.
Oh, okay, I see it now. That is the aha moment.
Right. The real environmental victory isn't pouring artificial atmospheric rain into the local river. The victory is leaving the vital groundwater alone. By supplying its own technical water through atmospheric harvesting, the data center lessens its massive parasitic burden on the public supply. It operates invisibly with respect to the aquifer.
That makes total sense. A penny saved is a penny earned. A gallon harvested from the sky is a gallon left in the ground for farmers and residents.
Exactly.
And this leads us perfectly into how this building actually interacts with the public on a day-to-day basis. Because avoiding that corporate greenwashing, proving that the building is a good neighbor, is central to this thesis.
Yes. The author argues that a facility consuming this much public electricity and occupying this much land owes the community a civic return.
A civic return.
And that starts with the public radio institution itself. By anchoring the site with working NPR studios, public newsrooms, and sound archives, the building becomes a place of public trust in journalism, not an impenetrable, walled-off corporate fortress.
And there is a specific feature he proposes called the environmental dashboard. I found this to be incredibly bold, honestly, considering how secretive tech companies usually are.
It is a demand for radical transparency. The building publicly, visibly displays its real-time performance to anyone walking by. Its peak megawatt demand from the grid, its total water consumption, its acoustic noise levels.
Like a giant scoreboard.
Exactly like a scoreboard. And it does this without corporate euphemism. If the facility is pulling 500 megawatts from the grid on a hot Tuesday afternoon in August, that number is displayed in real time for the public to see.
Imagine a tech giant like Amazon or Google agreeing to put a giant glowing scoreboard on their front lawn showing exactly how much power they are draining from the local grid in real time.
They'd hate it.
It is terrifying from a public relations perspective, but it forces absolute accountability. You can't hide behind a yearly report if your daily consumption is projected on the wall.
And he applies that same strict, uncompromising standard to the idea of waste heat. You often hear modern data centers claim they will use the excess heat from their servers to warm local homes or greenhouses.
Yeah, you hear that a lot.
Enfield says that claim is essentially fraudulent unless there is a real, legally contracted off-taker. You cannot just slap a heat reuse label on an architectural schematic if the heat is, in reality, just venting into the sky because no one actually built the greenhouse.
So what does this all mean for the actual people living next door? If you live in Kearney or Grand Island, you aren't getting a walled fortress with diesel generators roaring all night, flanked by security guards.
No, you are getting a public park, a civic concert hall, an educational institution, and a live, honest data feed of exactly what the facility is taking from your town and what it is giving back.
But, as the thesis rigorously notes, the art and the public access can never endanger the community or the servers themselves. There are strict operating modes governing the building.
Right, like quiet night mode. The music stops playing, the exterior lighting drops, the water harvesting goes silent if it needs to, the community gets to sleep. The building respects the rhythm of the town.
And more importantly, thermal priority mode or emergency mode. If the servers start overheating due to a heat wave or there is a fire alarm, all the artistic expression shuts down instantly.
Instantly. Every pneumatic valve flips to a safe position to prioritize server cooling or life safety. The poetry instantly yields to the engineering.
Which is how you convince an underwriter to write a multi-billion-dollar insurance policy for a building that plays music.
Exactly.
But this brings me to my final overarching question. All of this, the nested concrete shells, the phase-distributed breathing to save fan energy, the ultrasonic water harvesting shaking molecules loose, the acoustic black holes, the radio pipe organs. It is highly, highly theoretical.
It is.
How do we know this multi-billion-dollar idea won't just be a massive, embarrassing public failure when they finally flip the switch.
That is exactly why the author explicitly states in the text that this is a pre-feasibility proposal. He is not standing on a stage saying, give me $1 billion and we build this tomorrow.
Right.
The fundamental requirement of the thesis is prototype before monumentality. The project cannot and should not be built all at once.
It demands the scientific method, step-by-step empirical proof. Walk me through the prototypes he outlines, because they are so logical and grounded.
There are 6 distinct phases of testing required before the full campus is ever committed to. Prototype A is a rack-level thermal test.
Okay, testing the breathing.
Yes. They build a single server rack in a controlled lab and test if that pulsing phase-distributed airflow actually cools the processors better than a steady fan without causing thermal stress to the hardware.
Right, because if the servers melt in the lab, you don't build the building. What does prototype B?
A one-bay acoustic lung. They build one single section of that massive curved concrete shell, put a real roaring industrial fan behind it, and measure if the labyrinth actually stops the noise across all frequencies, especially those 22-foot low-frequency bass waves.
You got to stop the bass. What about prototype C?
The radio pavilion. This is a small, standalone public structure that maps the live radio feed to a small set of pipes and chimes.
To see if it actually sounds good.
Exactly. The goal here is purely aesthetic and civic, to see if the translation algorithm actually sounds beautiful and engaging, or if it just sounds like chaotic, annoying noise. Does the public actually want to listen to this for 20 years?
I love that they are testing the artistic merit with the same rigor as the thermodynamics.
Right.
If the algorithm makes it sound like a dying robot, the community will revolt, and the project fails. Prototype D.
The Sorbonne ultrasonic facade module, they put the MIT water harvesting tech out in the actual Nebraska weather for a full year, not a pristine lab in Massachusetts.
Real weather.
Real weather. They need to prove exactly how much water it yields in freezing Midwestern winters and humid Midwestern summers, and how much energy it actually takes per liter in the real world.
Prototype E brings it all together, right?
It does. The integrated water organ court. They test the atmospheric water capture, the ultrasonic release, the physical acoustics of the water falling, and the water treatment hierarchy, all working together as one continuous closed loop.
And only after all those prototypes succeed empirically do you get to phase F.
Phase F, modular expansion. The data center is built bay by bay, so capacity grows organically with demand, and the building always looks visually complete, rather than looking like an abandoned, half-finished megastructure if funding dries up.
It is incredibly refreshing. It's not a tech CEO promising a magical, frictionless utopia. It's an architect demanding hard, empirical proof at every single step before risking a single drop of public resources.
It is a profound blueprint for responsible, honest infrastructure.
Okay, let's pull all of this together. We started this deep dive looking at a political freeze in Nebraska, a state overwhelmed by the sheer, crushing scale of modern data centers draining their grid and their aquifers. And Zachary David Enfield's thesis responds to that crisis not by hiding the infrastructure behind a taller fence, but by elevating it into a monument.
We moved through a visionary architectural shell that uses physical thickness to separate the digital core from the public. We explored the complex thermodynamics of phase-distributed air, the acoustic engineering that turns concrete labyrinths into a silencer, the molecular magic of ultrasonic atmospheric water harvesting, and the vital civic duty of transparency.
And it ended with a pragmatic, unglamorous testing plan to ensure it actually works in the real world. It's a stunning piece of design, but it leaves me with one final lingering thought.
What's that?
This thesis suggests that a building should reperform its internal data as public music, and it should publicly, physically show us the water and power it uses on a giant dashboard. It makes the invisible consumption of the digital world hypervisible to the physical world.
It demands that we look at what we are taking from the earth.
Exactly. And my question to you, listening to this right now, is this. What if all our modern infrastructure operated this way? Think about the power plant in your town, the massive Amazon shipping hub down the highway, or the server farm storing your family photos. What if they were required by law to physically and artistically express their resource consumption back to the public in real time?
That would change everything.
Would we as a society build things differently? Would we consume things differently? If we could literally hear and see exactly what those buildings were taking from our communities every single second.
It completely changes the entire relationship between a community and its machines.
It really does. Thank you for taking this massive journey with us today, and thank you for continuing to question the invisible infrastructure that runs your world. Until next time, keep diving deep.